I never imagined my marriage would end in a courtroom with my husband laughing like he was signing a prank birthday card instead of divorce papers. But there he was. Jason sat across from me with a cheap pen in his hand, grinning ear to ear as if he'd just won some cruel game. The air in the courthouse conference room was stale, full of tension and the distant squeaks of rolling briefcases and lawyers exchanging guarded pleasantries. I had spent the last 6 years of my life giving this man everything: my loyalty, my time, my body, my forgiveness, and my silence. He gave me a signature and a smirk. "You sure you don't want to fight over the dining set? Or should I just keep it with the rest of your dignity?" That was the last thing he said before the judge entered. What he didn't know, and what I'd waited so long to reveal, was that Jason wouldn't be walking out of that courtroom with smug satisfaction for long. Because I wasn't just his wife. I was a silent owner of the company he thought he built alone. A ghost in the margins of his contracts. A quiet architect of every major decision he took credit for. And my net worth? Let's just say it would soon speak louder than any insult he could throw. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Hi, I'm Isabelle Grant, and if you've ever been betrayed, underestimated, or treated like a background character in your own life story, then you'll understand why I'm telling this. And if stories like this keep you watching, bellhop bell, please subscribe to Karma Encrypted, where real revenge stories come back with interest. Now back to how I ended up becoming the biggest surprise in my ex-husband's petty little world. Jason and I met in college. He was loud, charming, all jawline and ambition. I was quieter, more strategic. He always had the big vision, but I had the blueprint. While he was pitching ideas and making promises, I was building business models in silence, working behind the scenes, and helping him sound smarter in every boardroom. We married young, built a life in Chicago, started a company, his company. At least, that's what everyone believed. What people didn't know is that I was the one who secured our first investor. I was the one who negotiated the vendor contracts, cut operational costs, and restructured our launch plan after the first quarter loss. I didn't need credit. I thought our success was enough. Until it wasn't. The cheating wasn't even the worst part. Not at first. It was how carelessly he did it. Jason didn't bother to hide the texts. Didn't even try to lie when I found lipstick on his shirt. He acted like I should have expected it. Like being disrespected was just part of the CEO wife starter pack. Come on, Izzy. You're not the fun one. You're the smart one. You handle spreadsheets, not lingerie. I'll never forget that line. It carved itself into my spine. He wanted someone fun, flashy, disposable. He wanted to trade me in for a younger model, literally. So I made a decision. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I smiled. And I started preparing. While Jason pranced around town with his 25-year-old assistant, I met with lawyers, accountants, a forensic analyst. I had quietly kept documentation, proof of my ownership, involvement, and intellectual property. I had signed the right things at the right time and kept digital receipts of all of it. I wasn't his silent partner by mistake. I was intentional. I rewrote my will, changed my beneficiaries, registered a trust. Jason thought I was letting him win, but I was laying landmines. On the morning of our divorce hearing, Jason strolled into court like he was auditioning for a Netflix comedy special. His new girlfriend, Amber, wore sunglasses indoors and filmed TikToks in the hallway while he joked with his lawyer about splitting hairs, not assets. They didn't realize what kind of hearing this was. My attorney, Ms. Simone Hastings, a 6-foot-tall force of velvet and steel, sat beside me, calm and unreadable. Jason barely acknowledged her. He should've, because she was about to detonate his whole world with one paragraph. The judge was a no-nonsense woman named Carla Mason, sharp eyes, gray streak in her bun, voice like a gavel even when she whispered. "Let's begin," she said. "We're here to finalize the divorce of Jason Reed and Isabelle Grant Reed. Any assets to declare before division." Jason leaned in. "Everything's mine. We have a prenup. She didn't make a dime while we were married." Carla nodded, flipping through the documents. Ms. Hastings stood. "Your Honor, We'd like to present documentation in validating that claim. My client co-founded Reed Technologies under her maiden name. The shares were assigned quietly at inception to protect investor confidence. She owns 48% of a company. Jason laughed. Literally laughed out loud. You can't be serious. That's absurd. Ms. Hastings handed over proof. Contracts. Emails. Investor letters. Board approvals. Carla took her time. Her eyes scanned the pages like a hawk watching prey squirm. Then she looked at Jason. Mr. Reed, did you not read these before signing them? He blinked. She was just helping with admin. I didn't think. That seems to be your problem, Carla said, unimpressed. You didn't think. And then she dropped the bomb. As of this morning's valuation, she continued, Reed Technologies is worth $128 million. Mrs. Grantreed's shares place her personal net worth at $61.4 million. The courtroom went dead silent. Jason's face strained. Amber's TikTok stopped recording mid-frame. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. 60 what? I turned and met his eyes for the first time that day. And I smiled. The kind of smile he hadn't seen in years. The kind of smile that says, I was never the silent one. You just weren't listening. What happened next was poetic. Jason's lawyer asked for a recess. Amber left the room. And I signed the final papers, calm, controlled, victorious. Outside, as cameras swarmed and reporters tried to get quotes, I walked straight to my car without saying a word. Because the story wasn't over. This was only chapter 1. 2 days. That's how long it took for Jason's ego to go from smug to stunned to absolutely unhinged. When we left the courthouse, I thought that was the end. The papers were signed. The numbers had been declared. His mouth had finally been silenced. For the first time in our 6-year marriage, I had taken control and done it without raising my voice or stooping to his level. But then he did what narcissists do best. He changed the story. And suddenly my inbox and voicemail were flooded. The first email came that evening. Short. Unapologetic. Izzy, we need to talk. You blindsided me. I think it's only fair we split the shares you kept hidden. Let's be reasonable. I didn't respond. The second came the next morning. I gave you that platform. My name built that company. You wouldn't have anything without me. I'll get a judge to see it. The third was from his lawyer. More professional, but equally absurd. We are prepared to contest the valuation and argue for an equitable redistribution of all intellectual and financial assets. Our client believes your involvement, while notable, was not central to the company's market value. That made me laugh, actually laugh. Because I had the emails, the receipts, the timestamps, the contracts. I had every spreadsheet and late-night text where Jason begged me to fix things he didn't understand, to draft proposals he later pitched as his own, to renegotiate deals he nearly blew up with his arrogance. He wanted to revise history. But I had the footage. I met with Simone Hastings again, this time at her office. A floor-to-ceiling glass fortress downtown that made you feel both exposed and protected, like the truth had nowhere to hide, but neither did you. He's flailing, she said after reviewing the latest correspondence. This isn't about fairness. It's about humiliation. You embarrassed him. By existing? I asked dryly. By outsmarting him, she replied. Simone had seen this pattern before. Men who thrived off power until the women behind their empire stepped forward and refused to be silent. He underestimated you, she said. Now he's scrambling to prove he's still in control. I signed a motion to block his attempt to reopen the case. What Jason didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this contingency. During our marriage, I had worked with a financial strategist to build my own investment network, real estate, stocks, and intellectual property ownerships, many under my maiden name. Legally sound, ethically bulletproof, quietly powerful. The judge's declaration of my net worth at $61.4 million? That was only my shares in Reed Technologies. He didn't know about the rest. He still doesn't. And he won't, unless I decide to tell the world. But Jason wasn't done making a fool of himself. He went to the press. 3 days after the hearing, a headline surfaced. Jilted husband speaks out. She stole my company. The article was laughable. Jason painted himself as a victim of emotional manipulation, claimed I gaslight him into giving away equity. He even said I used emotional blackmail to secure documents, never mind that all signatures and decisions were dated, notarized, and reviewed by his own lawyers. But what made me boil wasn't the lies. It was the picture. He'd posed with Amber in front of a luxury car we bought together. Her diamond necklace glinted under the caption, "She took the money. We still have each other." Amber, who once asked me if LLC stood for Louboutin Limited Collection. Simone told me not to respond. You don't need to explain yourself to tabloids. But I did need to protect the truth. So, I contacted an independent journalist, a woman I trusted, Savannah Chun from the Ledger. She interviewed me privately. We walked through the timeline, the paper trail, the board statements that confirmed my involvement from day one. I'm not here to play victim, I told her. I just want to make sure women understand. When someone treats you like you're replaceable, that's when you become dangerous. Not by screaming, but by proving you were always essential. She published the article 3 days later. The real brains behind Reed Technologies. Isabelle Grant breaks her silence. And just like that, the narrative changed. Jason exploded. He called me 15 times that night. Sent texts ranging from threats to begging. You ruined me. Let's fix this. You've made your point. Come home. Come home? My new place had floor-to-ceiling windows, art I actually picked, an air that didn't reek of his cologne, and entitlement. That was home. Then came the party. It was a tech industry gala. I had RSVP'd weeks before the divorce was finalized, but didn't expect to attend. Until I realized Jason was going to be there. With Amber. With his broken smile, and his forced confidence. I wore black satin, and a watch that cost more than his car. When I stepped into the ballroom, conversations paused. Eyes shifted. Whispers followed. Jason didn't approach me, but he watched. All night. Watched me laugh with investors who now knew my name. Watched me speak on a panel about sustainable leadership. Watched as I shook hands with people who used to only address him. And watched as one of the board members, the same man who once called me Jason's assistant, handed me a glass of champagne and said, "We all backed the wrong horse, didn't we?" That night, I didn't cry. I didn't gloat either. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. I hadn't just won. I had become. And Jason? He was still busy chasing status in a room that no longer belonged to him. Weeks passed. His lawsuit was dismissed. Amber left him. Probably around the time she realized a man full of ego and debt is just a man with nothing left to offer. Last I heard, he was trying to launch a startup with a former intern. It's called Reignite. Cute. But me? I didn't reignite. I evolved. Jason always claimed he was the innovator, the visionary, the genius behind Reed Technologies' success. To the outside world, he was the charismatic face who landed investors and charmed executives. I was the quiet one, the supportive wife, the one no one noticed in the photos at launch parties or fundraising events. I stayed in the background because I believed that building something great with someone meant you shared the credit and the power. But I was wrong. Because the moment things got difficult, Jason rewrote history without me in it. And he thought he got away with it. Until the patent hearing. It began with a phone call from Mark Brenner, a former lead engineer at Reed Technologies. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year. He had left shortly before my separation from Jason began. "Isabelle," he said, voice tense. "I know this might sound strange, but are you aware your name was recently removed from the primary patent?" I blinked. What? The software RLearn, the adaptive AI learning algorithm we developed 2 years ago. You and I wrote the first 3 models together. I remember, I said slowly. I submitted the technical specs, the logic tree, even the testing sequences. He exhaled sharply. Exactly. But the new filing only lists Jason as inventor. Your contribution is gone. My blood ran cold. I ended the call and immediately checked the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office's database. There it was. Patent hashtag 88291RL. Filed just 1 week before our divorce hearing. Inventor, Jason Reed. No mention of me. No co-authorship. Nothing. It wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. Jason had falsified inventor credentials on a federally recognized patent, one that would impact millions in licensing fees and product development. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I'd moved on. He thought wrong. I called Simone the next morning. She didn't even blink. "I'll file an injunction by noon," she said. "And I'll forward the documents to the Patent Office's fraud division." "But I want more than a reversal," I told her. "I want this to become public. I want every investor, every executive, every bro in a boardroom who believed his version of the story to see the truth." Simone smiled. "Then we give them a front row seat." While the legal gears turned, I reached out to Savannah Chin again, my trusted journalist from the Ledger. This time, we sat down for a recorded interview. She leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Are you ready for the backlash?" "Yes." "And the headlines? Bring them." She hit record. "Isabelle," she began, "what does it feel like to know your own husband tried to erase you from the intellectual property you helped build?" I looked into the lens. "It feels like war. Not the kind with bombs and bullets, but the kind where someone weaponizes silence. And I'm done being silent." The story went live 2 days later. Erased. How Isabelle Grant was written out of her own legacy. It exploded. Tech Twitter lit up. Women in STEM flooded my inbox with support. Legal analysts tore Jason apart in think pieces. Investors in Reed Technologies panicked. A week later, the board froze Jason's license authority and launched an internal audit. The Patent Office reopened the case, and after verifying digital timestamps and source code logs, all stored in my encrypted vault, they issued a formal correction. The new document read, Patent hashtag 88291RL. Primary inventors, Isabelle Grant, Mark Brenner. Additional contributor, Jason Reed. Not only had he been knocked down from lead inventor, he was now last. I framed the notice. Jason, unsurprisingly, tried to spin the situation. He posted a self-pitying essay on LinkedIn about being overwhelmed, paperwork mistakes, and wanting to honor all contributors equally. He ended with, "In hindsight, I should have done more to recognize Isabelle's contributions." I commented, "You did. You tried to steal them." It received 112,000 likes. A week later, I was invited to speak at the International Women in Tech Summit in San Diego. The panel was called, "The Credit We Deserve." I stood before an auditorium filled with women who'd lived versions of my story, dismissed in meetings, edited out of acknowledgments, left out of company bios, asked to take notes in rooms they were qualified to lead. I told them this. Jason didn't steal my work. He only delayed the moment when I claimed it. After the speech, I was approached by a woman in her 60s, gray hair, elegant posture, eyes filled with something heavy. She took my hand. "I stayed quiet my whole life," she said. "Watched men take my work, my ideas, my salary. But hearing you today made me feel seen." I hugged her, and I realized this wasn't about Jason anymore. It never really was. This was about every woman who was ever told to let it go, to not make waves, to just be grateful. No. We don't just survive now. We document. We defend. We demand. Meanwhile, Jason's reputation was tanking. Reed Technologies stock dipped. His personal brand fell apart. His phone calls became less charming and more desperate. He begged board members to give him another chance. They declined. Eventually, they forced him into early resignation. I was asked to step in as interim board advisor. I declined. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because I didn't want to inherit his mess. I was building my own company now. It's called Clarity Systems, a startup focused on AI ethics, transparency, and equitable collaboration, where women, BIPOC professionals, and underrepresented founders have real stake and decision-making power. I recruited engineers I trusted, lawyers who had protected me, executives who had watched from the sidelines and were ready to start fresh. And my first hire? Mark Brenner. The man who warned me. The man who believed me. Jason? He filed a last-ditch appeal on the patent. It failed. Then he tried to launch a podcast. It flopped. Last I heard, he was consulting under a fake LLC, trying to clean up his name like it was a scuffed pair of shoes. But some stains never come out. And some women? We don't get erased. It wasn't supposed to be a trap. It was supposed to be a dinner. A quiet evening to reconnect with old friends, hosted by one of our mutual acquaintances, Chloe Wilkins, a woman I hadn't seen since before Jason and I split. She was the kind of socialite turned VC who hosted champagne fundraisers with jazz quartets and low lighting. When the invitation arrived in my inbox, it seemed innocent enough. Small circle, no drama. Just good food and overdue catching up. You've earned a little sparkle, Isabelle. I hadn't RSVP'd immediately, but something about it felt safe. Familiar. I needed a break from the noise of lawsuits and exposés. From Jason's crumbling empire. From the constant requests to please tell your story again on camera. So I said yes. And I walked straight into the lion's den. The dinner was at Chloe's brownstone in Lincoln Park. Elegant, understated, scented with peonies and confidence. I wore a black wrap dress and gold cuff bracelets. Nothing flashy. Just clean lines and a sharp mind. When I walked in, the first thing I saw was the long marble table, and seated at the end of it, laughing with a glass of wine in his hand like nothing had ever happened. Jason. My first instinct was to leave. But before I could turn, Chloe was already at my side. I meant to tell you. He texted last minute asking if he could drop by. I figured it'd be fine given how strong you are now. I raised an eyebrow. You invited my ex-husband, who publicly humiliated me and falsified a patent, to a dinner marketed as safe space. Her smile twitched. He said he wanted closure. Maybe you both do. That's when I realized this wasn't about reconciliation. This was about control. Chloe had always leaned toward drama. She didn't want peace. She wanted a spectacle. I stepped into the room anyway, because leaving would have looked like fear. And I had nothing to fear anymore. Jason stood up when he saw me. Izzy. Jason, I said neutral. He smiled like a man who thought his charm still had value. I took a seat directly across from him. The room filled quickly. Entrepreneurs. Investors. A few faces I knew well, a few I only recognized from LinkedIn. Everyone acted normal, like this wasn't the most awkward setup of the decade. Appetizers came. Wine flowed. But I didn't eat much. I watched Jason. And more importantly, I listened. Because Jason didn't just show up to surprise me. He came with a purpose. Halfway through the main course, seared duck and roasted figs, he started his monologue. So, I've been doing some thinking, he said, clinking his wine glass. We've all had tough years. Growth comes in waves, right? People nodded politely. I made some mistakes, he continued. But we're all human. And truth is, I've learned more from the fall than I ever did from the top. A woman at the end of the table smiled. Sounds like you're in a new chapter. Jason leaned forward. Actually, I'm starting something new. A consultancy focused on startup turnarounds. Tech founders who've lost their way. I help them get back on track. That's when he dropped the bomb. And Isabelle here, well, we've been talking about collaborating again. I nearly choked on my water. Eyes turned toward me. What? I said. Jason's smile tightened. Come on, Izzy. We've had conversations. Closure. Shared reflections. I narrowed my eyes. We haven't spoken in weeks. You tried to erase me from my own patent. You lied to a judge. And now you're pretending we're in business talks. The table went quiet. Jason shrugged. You misunderstood. I just meant the door isn't closed forever. I looked at him, voice steady. The door doesn't exist anymore. Chloe cleared her throat. Well, this got intense quickly. Maybe we should all toast to fresh starts.
But the mood had changed.
People were whispering. A man next to me leaned in. Is he serious about the consultancy? He's serious about rebuilding his reputation, I said, even if it means rewriting mine again. That's when another twist dropped. From the opposite end of the table, a soft voice spoke. I think people should know who helped fund that consultancy. We all turned. It was Avery Liu, a fintech founder I admired. Quiet, brilliant, meticulous. She continued. Jason reached out to me last month for funding. Claimed you two were co-launching the platform. I stared at Jason. You lied to secure funding? His smile cracked for the first time. I was trying to show them you believed in me, that I wasn't alone. You're alone, I said, because you made sure of it. The night spiraled from there. Jason excused himself early. Chloe awkwardly tried to pivot the conversation to NFTs. And I quietly stood, thanked the host, and walked out. But Avery followed me. I'm sorry, she said. I should have verified. You didn't owe me that, I replied. Yes, I did. Because too many women like you get erased. Again and again. And I don't want to be complicit in that. She handed me a card. When you launch your next round for Clarity Systems, call me. Outside, the air was cold.
Crisp. Clean.
I walked the streets of Chicago with my heels clicking like punctuation marks behind me. Jason thought he could use my name again. Thought one dinner would erase lawsuits, lies, and lost credibility. But all he'd done was remind the room of the very thing that took him down. His belief that I'd always stay in his shadow. Not anymore. The next morning, I released a public statement. To clarify, I am not associated with any venture being developed by Jason Reed. Any use of my name, likeness, or reputation in association with his future projects is unauthorized and will be treated as intellectual defamation. It made the rounds.
Quickly.
And so did the truth. 2 days later, I received a cease and desist letter from Jason's legal team claiming I'd slandered him at a private dinner. Simone sent them a single reply. Defamation only applies if it isn't true. And in this case, we have witnesses. Lots of them. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Instead, I felt calm. Because something had finally clicked. Jason wasn't my rival. He wasn't even my villain anymore. He was just a man drowning in a sea of his own illusions. And I had already swum ashore. Jason once told me, legacy is about how loud people remember your name. I told him he was wrong. Legacy is about what still stands after your name disappears. And his was about to go up for sale, piece by piece. It began with whispers. A leaked screenshot here. A panicked investor call there. Then came the headlines. Reed Technologies files emergency liquidation plan after internal collapse. Jason had been hemorrhaging money for months, trying to hold onto the illusion of relevance. After stepping down, he had quietly borrowed against the last of his restricted shares, funneling capital into half-baked startups, social campaigns, a vanity app no one downloaded, and a ghost consultancy with 0 clients. The board was done covering for him. They voted to auction off all remaining personal Reed assets linked to Jason's tenure, including vehicles, stock reserves, and even items from the flagship office he'd once designed like a shrine to his own ego. And that's when I got the idea. I wasn't interested in revenge. Not anymore. But I was interested in the truth. In full circle moments. In reminding people that power taken from women often becomes a mirror for reinvention. So when the auction date was confirmed, I registered under my maiden name, Isabelle Grant. No fanfare. No press release. Just strategy. The event was held at a private estate hall in Oak Brook. Glass walls, black ties, and enough self-importance to make a Bentley blush. I walked in alone. Jason arrived 30 minutes later, escorted by his lawyer and a PR consultant who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. He didn't see me at first, but I saw him. His suit didn't quite fit the way it used to. His swagger was hollow. And for the first time, I felt pity. Not enough to stop. Just enough to savor what came next. The items up for bid were as dramatic as Jason himself. Lot number 4, the marble conference table from his executive suite, custom carved with the company initials. Lot number 9, a gold-framed first edition of the Lean Startup, signed by a man Jason once called a personal mentor but had only met twice. Lot number 14, his prized private wine collection, once reserved for investor wooing and Instagram validation. Lot number 22, a limited edition AI display unit with custom code signatures, developed during the peak of Reed Technologies' expansion. But it was lot number 27 that caught everyone's attention. The final item of the evening. A 12-foot commemorative wall installation titled Vision to Victory, featuring Jason Reed's image, mission statements, and the original design schematics for Reed Technologies' core product suite. Estimated value, $35,000. But to me, it was priceless. Not for its worth, but for what it symbolized, the last monument to a myth that needed tearing down. Bidding started slowly. $10,000. $12,500. $15,000. Jason stood rigid in the corner, arms crossed. At $17,500, I raised my hand.
He saw me.
His expression flickered, confusion, then fury. He whispered to his lawyer. But it didn't matter. I kept my hand up. $20,000. $22,000. $25,000. Then silence. The auctioneer smirked. Any further bids? Jason raised his hand at the last second. 30,000. Gasps rippled. I didn't flinch. I raised mine again. 40. The room froze. The auctioneer blinked. We have $40,000. Going once. Jason hesitated. He knew he couldn't win this. Not financially. Not publicly. His image, the literal image of himself, was being bought back by the woman he once laughed at across a courtroom. Going twice. Jason turned away.
Sold.
To Ms. Isabelle Grant. The applause was polite. Mine was internal, because I hadn't just bought a wall. I had bought closure. When I arrived home, the piece was delivered 2 days later, still wrapped in velvet and regret. I didn't hang it. Instead, I invited local artists, young, underrepresented creatives, and commissioned them to transform it. They used it as a canvas. They covered Jason's face in gold leaf and shattered glass. They painted a phoenix rising out of a server room. They stenciled quotes from women in tech, survivors of betrayal, and anonymous contributors long overshadowed by louder names. The final piece was exhibited at the Unity Project's annual gala, where it now stands as a reclaimed monument titled, What Remains After the Noise. Jason sent me a letter after the auction.
Typed.
Cold. No apology. Just legalese threatening defamation charges if I used his likeness, without consent. Simone's reply was one sentence. Your client no longer owns that likeness. It's been paid for in full. The following month, Clarity Systems reached its first funding milestone. Avery Liu came on board as lead investor. 3 of Jason's former developers joined my team, and I received an award for ethical innovation from Women Forward Alliance. While Jason, he filed for personal bankruptcy, sold his car, tried launching a YouTube channel called Rebuilding Reed. It had 42 subscribers. Sometimes I drive past his old office, now under new ownership. The glass panels reflect differently now. And on days when the sun hits just right, I can see my own reflection in them. Not as his wife, not as a victim, but as a woman who refused to stay silent. A woman who bought the last piece of the lie and turned it into something real. People always ask me why I stayed quiet, why I didn't post screenshots, why I didn't go live, why I didn't fight louder, faster, Messier. The truth? Because silence is not surrender. Sometimes it's a weapon. And in my case, it was strategy. In the chaos that followed the auction, the world finally began to adjust to a new version of my name. Not just Jason's ex. Not just the woman behind the code. But Isabelle Grant, visionary, founder, architect of something far bigger than revenge.
And Jason?
He faded. Not instantly. Not dramatically. Just slowly. The way noise fades after a fire alarm is turned off. Still ringing faintly in your bones, but less and less until one day you wake up and it's gone. It's hard to explain how it feels to reclaim your story after years of being edited out of your own life. There's no champagne pop, no headline with confetti, just a quiet, powerful moment where you realize, he stopped defining me a long time ago. I just stopped waiting for someone else to notice.
And now?
Now I live by my own design. Clarity Systems officially launched 6 months after the auction. We secured 3 government contracts for ethical AI implementation. Our team grew to 42. Our advisory board included women who had once been cast aside for being too soft or too emotional in tech. And we offered internships exclusively to first-gen college students and mothers returning to the workforce. We didn't just build software. We built correction. And I never once mentioned Jason's name on our platform, because sometimes the loudest message you can send is to not speak someone's name at all. A few weeks after Clarity's first keynote, I received a package at the office. No return address. Inside was a small, worn notebook. At first, I didn't recognize it. But then I opened the first page. His handwriting. Jason's. Not a letter. Not a confession. Just entries, raw, inconsistent, dated over the last 2 years. Painful admissions. Unsent messages. Bits of rage. Bits of regret. I didn't mean to ruin it. I just didn't know how to share. She was always better than me. I pretended that didn't scare me. I tried to outshine her instead of standing beside her. I wonder if she ever loved the version of me I tried to be. I sat with it for a while. Then I closed it. Because nothing in those pages changed the story. I didn't win because he lost. I won because I chose me. I kept that notebook. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that even the loudest men are sometimes just boys who never learned how to grow into their silence. And that women like me, we don't destroy. We outlast. My favorite moment came on a rainy Thursday, walking past a bookstore downtown. There in the window display was a hardcover copy of The Ones They Overlooked, an anthology of essays from women in STEM who had been denied, erased, or rewritten. My chapter. Blueprints and Battlefields. Inside, I had written, when they dismiss you, stay still. When they underestimate you, smile. Because silence builds the kind of power noise can't touch. And by the time they realize, you'll already be standing on the empire they never saw coming. Jason's final public appearance was at a tech panel nobody really attended. He sat on stage, half the seats empty, fumbling through a pitch no one cared to fund. The man who once laughed while signing my divorce papers now spoke into microphones that barely echoed. And me? I was speaking at MIT the same weekend, to a sold-out hall of engineers, founders, and survivors. I looked out at the crowd and said, don't waste energy proving you're strong. Build quietly, build strategically, and let the results be louder than your revenge. They stood.
And clapped.
And I didn't cry. I just stood taller. I haven't seen Jason since. People say he lives in Arizona now, that he's writing a book, or trying to. I wish him peace. But I don't wish him a comeback. Because some men don't need more chances. They need to be remembered as the warning, not the example. As for me, I'm building again, not to prove a point, but because it's what I love. Because success tastes sweeter when you're no longer trying to earn it from someone who never deserved to give it. To every woman reading this who's been underestimated, you don't need to shout. You don't need to beg. You don't need to make them understand. You need only remember who you are. And then, let your silence do the work.